The best I can in that amount of time.
This is Ambassador John
with your
Bolton
permission,
on
I'll start
Wednesday
off with
morning,
a technical,
saving the world in 2 minutes.
diplomatic term. The world is a mess.
Yes.
And it's a mess in large measure because of our leadership in Washington. We've seen the consequences of 8 years of the Obama administration, which I think at its core believes that the world will be a safer place if America is a less powerful country. If America doesn't take the steps necessary to protect its citizens and its people and its interests and its friends and allies around the world, we won't provoke our adversaries. This is an administration that believes that American strength is provocative, and that they don't realize that what's really provocative to our adversaries is American weakness. And let's be very clear, we're all aware we've had some contention in the Republican nomination process for the presidency. But we've come down to an unmistakable choice. The reality is that somebody is going to be elected president in November. You can like that or not like that, but somebody's going to be elected president in November. And if Hillary is elected, we're going to have 4 more years of precisely the same kinds of policies, domestically as well as internationally, that we've had under Barack Obama. She is running for his 3rd term. Now, many of our friends in Washington and New York say, but Hillary will be much better on foreign and defense policy than Obama, that she's going to be tougher and more protective of America's interest, more protective of our friends like the beleaguered country of Israel. This is all utter nonsense. Let's not kid ourselves. There is no national security wing of the Democratic Party anymore. I tell you, for our country, that doesn't make me happy. We would be safer and stronger as a country if there were a Scoop Jackson wing over there, if there were a Joe Lieberman wing over there, if there were any believers in national security at all. The policies that Barack Obama has been pursuing are not idiosyncratic to Obama. Whether he was succeeded by Joe Biden or John Kerry or Hillary Clinton makes no difference whatsoever. Their policies are the same. And I have to say, with respect to Hillary, I claim superior knowledge on this point because she and her husband were a year ahead of me in law school. So I feel like I've been burdened with them 20 years longer than the rest of the country. And, you know, I knew her back then, and she was, at that time, she was a radical. She was a political radical at that time. She's a radical today, just as Obama is. You know, the way you are at that time of your life, whether you're in law school or grad school or whatever you're doing, I think is pretty much where your heart is for the rest of your life. Now, don't get me wrong. She will say anything she needs to get elected. And she's already started to do that. But don't mistake where her true feelings are. She has not had to move to the left to catch up with Bernie Sanders. She's just peeled away the camouflage that she's worn for these last several years. And it really is true on national security affairs. I'll give you one more example. I have actually read her memoir of her 4 years as Secretary of State. I've read it, so you don't have to. In the service of our country, what can I say? I've read all 600 grindingly tedious pages. And, you know, if there's ever a point where she could, in a gracious and professional way, distance herself from Barack Obama, that was the place to do it. It's her memoir, written in her words, at her time. And you have to strain hard to see differences between what she would do as president and what the president she served for 4 years as his Secretary of State would do. Fundamentally, they are in the same place. So looking back over our nomination process, and I consider myself a friend of your great Senator Ted Cruz, look, should have used that line earlier. I wish him all the best in his future. Whatever the choice we had among the, let's remember now, 17 Republican candidates for president, that choice is not before us anymore. The choice is between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and that is an easy choice as far as I'm concerned. So let me just take a couple of examples of why I think Hillary is not qualified to be president. You know, she's got the listing on her resume. She's been Secretary of State. I can tell you that means little or nothing. The issue's not what jobs you've held. The issue is, do you have the competence, do you have the judgment, do you have the vision to be president? And she fails in many respects. Let's just take the email Clinton Foundation controversy for a minute. I think it's important. I can speak from the perspective of somebody who has served in 3 Republican administrations at the State Department under 6 Secretaries of State. What she did with her email, with her careless use of her electronic communications devices, put American security in enormous jeopardy. This effort that she undertook to remove her emails and other communications from scrutiny at the State Department, exposed important secrets of the United States to people in Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. And, you know, it's not just the emails. Foreign intelligence services are capable of taking control of your cell phone, or your laptop, or your other electronic devices. They can turn them into microphones that broadcast what you're saying, even if your cell phone is turned off. It's why when you go into very secure areas in the U.S. government, you take your cell phone out of your pocket and put it in a metal-lined box outside the room you're going to meet in. It's why we're told repeatedly when we serve in the government, don't take your personal laptop overseas. Don't leave it in your hotel room. Think about the environment that you're in. So it's not just because of her disregard of these basic protections. It's not just her emails that foreign governments have read. I suspect they've been listening to her conversations for years. And think about that. It's not just national security information they now have. Think of what else they've heard in those conversations about the Clinton Foundation and who knows what else. You know, the fact is that if I had done about 1/10 of what she did, I'd be in jail already. And
lock her up.
It's
lock her up. Lock her up. Lock her up.
you know, it is, unfortunately, we don't control the Justice Department, at least not now. But I tell you, we may not be able to indict her, but we can defeat her in November. The Clintons have thought they're above the rules since the moment they got into politics. And this is a case where it's not just for self-gain. If they were merely corrupt, I would be less worried than the fact they have jeopardized our national security. If you can't trust her to undertake these basic protections, how can you trust her on the bigger pictures? This is something I think we've got to communicate to our fellow citizens all over the country. And it obviously extends beyond that, and it goes really to what I think is the most significant, most salient failure of her tenure as Secretary of State. And there's a long list to go through of the misapprehension of the Arab Spring, the failure to understand that radical Islam is a political ideology that threatens the United States and Western civilization as a whole, the misunderstanding of Vladimir Putin and what his objectives are around the world, the misbegotten reset button, the concessions we've made to a Russia that's determined to prove Vladimir Putin's point that he made 10 years ago when he said the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. I think most of us think the collapse of the Soviet Union was a pretty good way to end the 20th century. Putin is determined to roll that back, and he's succeeding against this weak and feckless administration in Washington. China is busy expanding in imperial terms that you have to look far back into Chinese history to see. They're making belligerent moves in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. They're not just creating facts on the ground, as we say often about the Middle East. They're creating ground in the South China Sea to turn it into a Chinese province. We say, but how can that matter to us? It's so far away. What they're doing is turning what are now international waters into a Chinese lake. And every barrel of oil that goes to Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, key trading partners of the United States, every barrel of oil that comes from the Middle East to those countries goes through the South China Sea. Beijing will have its hands around the throats of those key allies if they're able to get away with it. And they are, because Barack Obama's budget over 8 years now has reduced our military capabilities to a level that it's hard to describe. You know, this came up in the 2012 election when Governor Romney properly pointed out that our Navy had fewer ships at sea than at any point since 1916. 280 ships at sea. And the president, in his typical snarky way, said, oh, well, yes, but merely measuring the number of ships at sea you have is not consequential because we have aircraft carriers, we have submarines, we have 21st century technology. Well, that would be great if our ships were fighting ships from 1916, but unfortunately other people have 21st century technology too, including particularly the Chinese, who have one of the world's most sophisticated cyber warfare programs, who have developed anti-access and area denial military capabilities to push the United States Navy back from the shores of East Asia, which we have dominated since 1945. They have anti-satellite capabilities that are intended to blind our intelligence gathering operations in time of conflict. They're building up their ballistic missile and nuclear weapons capabilities. They're building a blue water navy for the first time in 600 years in order to confront the United States. And what is our position on the South China Sea? We want all these territorial disputes to be resolved by peaceful negotiations. Who are we kidding? We're not kidding Beijing, that's for sure. This is just the context of the breakdown of the minimal stability that the United States has created since World War II. And let's make no mistake about it, that stability has given us economic prosperity unparalleled in human history. And it is uniquely the United States and its system of alliances that created this stability. Nobody else has done it. The United Nations hasn't done it. The European Union hasn't done it. Nobody else has done it. We have done it. And people claim, as Donald Trump has claimed rightly, that other countries are not bearing their fair share of the burden, that even our NATO allies don't spend as much on their own defense as they should, and that is something that must be corrected. But let's be clear. We're not doing this out of altruism. We're not doing it for the benefit of the others. We're doing it for ourselves. And nobody else is going to do it for us. So if the United States doesn't protect its interests, those interests will not be protected. And that brings me to the Middle East, where Barack Obama's withdrawal of American involvement and presence has led to a circumstance where all across the region, we have gone from a crisis in this country, a crisis in that country, to spreading chaos and anarchy all across. And you've just seen this weekend another example in Turkey. where the failed military coup now leaves the Erdogan government free to dismantle a century-long effort to make Turkey into a Eurocentric secular government. He's going to make it an Islamicist government. It jeopardizes Turkey's future in NATO. It exposes Europe's southeastern flank to more Russian advances. It obviously threatens Israel, and it demonstrates that the whole region is disintegrating. The state structures have come apart, and anarchy is spreading. And there's no better example of that than what happened in Libya in Benghazi on September the 11th, 2012. And it's a subject I know that you're familiar with. I just want to highlight it from what I saw as Hillary Clinton's personal failures before, during, and after Benghazi. Beforehand, you know, in February of 2011, the State Department had to withdraw all American personnel from Tripoli because they were in danger. Now, did we do that by bringing elements of the U.S. Navy into the Tripoli harbor to rescue our people? No, because we don't have a Sixth Fleet, really, in the Mediterranean anymore. We had to rent a Greek ferry boat to get our people out. Now, that was in February of 2011. That is strategic notice right now, right then, that Libya is a dangerous place, as the entire region is. Did the State Department under Hillary Clinton do anything in response to that to provide more security, not just for the official Americans, but for all Americans in the region? People there doing religious work, business people, people there on tourism. No, they didn't do a thing. So the argument that Hillary makes is, well, you know, I have technical people at the State Department who worry about security. Is that the argument she's going to make when she fails as President of the United States? Secretaries of State have to manage the State Department. They're responsible for the safety of 50,000 employees around the world. I've seen Secretaries of State get their fingers dirty in a lot less important things than the security of their people. She utterly failed to do that. She failed on the day of Benghazi itself, and I'll come back to that. And she failed after the attack. The sum total of the administration's response was to arrest one person, and question him on a ship in the Mediterranean, and then bring him back to the United States for a full due process criminal trial. What an amazing record of failure. And it's exemplified, I think, particularly by September the 11th itself. Hillary Clinton, on that day, with Americans under attack, not just in Benghazi, but in Sana'a in Yemen, where the embassy compound was broken into, in Cairo, Egypt, where the embassy compound was broken into, in Tunis and Tunisia, where the same thing happened. This was going on all across the region. That entire day, she did not once call the Defense Secretary, Leon Panetta. Not once. Now, as I said, I've worked for 6 different Secretaries of State, very different people, from Alexander Haig to Condoleezza Rice. Every one of them would have been on the phone every 15 minutes to the Secretary of Defense saying, what are we doing for our people? She didn't call him once. She had one conversation with Barack Obama. About what? About the Mohammed video. And then she went home. She went home. What's her reason? The phones work. Now, I can tell you, having been in a lot of different positions in the State Department, when the Secretary of State is in his or her office late into the night and all night on the 7th floor, if you have anything to do with the issue, you better be there too. This is like a commander of a warship leaving the bridge in the middle of a battle and going to his stateroom saying, keep me posted on how things are going. The fact is, that night, Hillary Clinton deserted while others were under fire. why did she not go on the Sunday talk shows that Susan Rice went on that Sunday? Because as Susan Rice herself said, she was unavailable after a grueling week. What happened was that the U.S. ambassador to Libya, who is the personal representative of the President of the United States, was murdered along with 3 other brave Americans, and the people who did it with impunity. That's the lesson of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, that you can kill the President's personal representative and do it with impunity. She is not qualified to be President of the United States, period, close quote. Thank you very much.